Hey, this is Mr. Barr, and this is the quadratic formula lesson. This is going to be a big one. This is one of the bigger topics in algebra. So the quadratic formula. So we're going to do some review first. First off, what is a quadratic? A quadratic is a second degree polynomial. Here are some examples of quadratics. Y equals x squared minus x minus 6. If I graph a quadratic, I get a parabola. There's the graph of it. And the roots or the solutions to this quadratic are right here at -2 and 3, where the parabola crosses the x-axis. And last time we learned that we could find those roots, that -2 and that 3, by factoring it. We could factor this thing out and find it. So there it is factored. And the roots are at 3 and -2. But we're going to learn another method, and it's called the quadratic formula. So here's how it works. Get to the notes. Bring the notes over. Let's get our notes going. This is another way of finding those roots. So in our notes, let's start with our name. And our topic today is quadratic formula. And if you do a YouTube search for this topic, you're going to find lots of lessons for it. It's just one of those really big topics. So what we're going to do is we're going to solve this equation. Now we already know the solution because we found it up here. It's at, 3 and -2. But we're going to solve it using the quadratic formula. So in your notes, 0 equals 1x squared minus 1x minus 6. Now I added the ones for clarity. Usually they're not written there. As you can see up here, the original equation, the ones weren't there, but I put those in for clarity. Now, each of these corresponds to a letter. This first one is called A, B, and C. So let's write that into our notes. A equals 1, B equals -1, and C equals -6. And each of those numbers are going to get plugged into the quadratic formula. Well, what is the quadratic formula? Here it is. X equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And what we're going to do is we're going to take each of these numbers, we're going to plug it in down here, and we're going to evaluate this. Notice the plus or minus. Why? Because we learned earlier there are two solutions to each of these quadratics. So let's start plugging numbers in. So I have x equals negative, that just comes with the equation, b. And what is b? Well, b is -1. That negative is part of the equation. This is part of the b. Plus or minus the square root of b. What is b? -1 squared minus 4a. A is 1. C is -6. All over 2a. So I plug everything in. And you can see right here, I have plugged everything into it. So we have -1 plus or minus -1 squared minus 4 times 1 times -6 all over 2 times 1. Now we're just going to work through this and simplify it down. -1 is 1. Plus or minus the square root Negative 1 squared is 1. Negative 4 times 1 times negative 6 is positive 25. No, excuse me, positive 24. All over 2 times 1, which is just 2. So slowly simplifying this thing down, we can simplify it even more. We're going to simplify it to x equals 1 plus or minus the square root of 25 over 2. We're getting close. We're going to simplify it even more to x equals 1 plus or minus 5 over 2. At this point, we're going to actually split this into two little problems. Now, you could probably all fit this on the same page in your notes. I'm going to have to rewrite a little bit of it, though. So right here, I have x equals 1 plus or minus 5 over 2. And I'm going to split it right here into a positive component, so 1 plus 5 over 2, and 1 minus 5 over 2. 1 plus 5 is 6, so I have 6 over 2, which is 3. There's one of the roots. 1 minus 5 is negative 4 over 2, which is negative 2. There's the other root. 3 and negative 2 are the solutions, which, if we go back to where we started, we already knew it was going to be 3 and negative 2. Or if we went back to the graph, 3 and negative 2. That is the quadratic formula. We're going to do another one. Actually, I think we're going to do 2 more in the notes today. So we did that one, 3 and negative 2. Splits it up. Okay. Here's our second one. So in your notes, let's write down the equation 0 equals 2x squared plus 7x plus 6. So A is 2, B is 7, C is 6. And we're going to plug all of this into the quadratic formula. So I'm going to write it down. Negative B plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we're going to plug in the a, the b, and the c. There it is, all plugged in. Negative b, which is 7, plus or minus the square root of b, which is 7, squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 7 squared minus 4 times 2 times 6 all over 2 times 2. Now we'll start simplifying this thing down. So there it is, all plugged in. So it's going to give me negative 7 plus or minus the square root. 7 squared is 49. 4 times 2 is 8, times 6 is 48, so negative 48. Over 2. Let's keep going with the simplification. 49 minus 48 is 1, and the square root of 1 is 1. So I'm at negative 7 plus or minus 1 over 2. Now I'm going to have to split it into the two equations. Here it is splitting up. Negative 7 plus 1 over 2. So that's negative 6 over 2, which is negative 3. Negative 7 minus 1 over 2, so that's negative 8 over 2, which is negative 4. Negative 3 and negative 4. Negative messed up, Mr. Barr. Where did I mess it up? I messed it up right here. This shouldn't have been a 2. This should have been a 4 right here, right? 4, 4, 4, 4. That would take me to a negative 1.5. 4, 4, and a negative 2. There we go. Sorry. So our correct answers are negative 1.5 and negative 2. Mr. Barr making mistakes. Living the distance learning dream and making mistakes. All right, let's do one more. Also in our notes, I'm going to solve this one right here. So our equation is 0 equals 3x squared minus 3x minus 3. So A, B, C. Notice this is a negative 3 and a negative 3. And let's plug it in. Negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4A C all over 2A. There it is plugged in. Let's see if that matches with my presentation. Negative negative 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 3 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 3 all over 2 times 3. Perfect. Now we'll start simplifying this down. Negative negative is a positive, so I'm 3 plus or minus the square root of 9 plus 412 times 3, 36 over 6. Take it down even further. 3 plus or minus the square root of 45 over 6. But Mr. Barr, what's the square root of 45? Yep, we're going to go decimal on this one. Square root of 45. 6.708. 3 plus or minus 6.708 over 6. Yep, this is what we're doing. And it matches up with what I did here. And that splits up into those two guys right there. So 3 plus 6.708 over 6. 3 minus 6.708 over 6. And we get down here to our two answers. Now I'll do that in my notes. Let's do it. So I'm doing 3 plus 6.708 over 6, which is 9.708 over 6, which is, I'm going to check it, which is 1.62 when it's rounded correctly. IXL is going to want you to take it to one decimal. Oh, you can't see what I'm doing. IXL is going to expect you to take it to 2 decimal places, to the hundredths. And our other one would be 3 minus 6.708 over 6, which is negative 3.708 over 6, which is negative 6.2. All right, guys. That is the lesson. We're not going to do any practice. If you're still confused with it, seriously, Google, search quadratic formula on YouTube. Khan Academy has this one. Every other math teacher in the world has done this lesson. All right. Thanks for watching.